What if I told you that the company that invented the digital camera went bankrupt because of it? Imagine a company so powerful that it was like Google, Apple, and Instagram all rolled into one. A company that owned the patents to the future. A company with the technology to rule the 21st century, sitting on a lab table in 1975. But instead of releasing it, they hid it. They feared it. And eventually it killed them. How does a $30 billion empire commit suicide by refusing to open its eyes? The answer lies in a snowy laboratory with a young engineer and a rejected idea. It is December 1975. We are in Rochester, New York, deep within the research laboratories of the Eastman Kodak Company. Outside, the snow is probably piling up, but inside, 24-year-old electrical engineer Steve Sasson is sweating. He is walking down a hallway to demonstrate a device he has spent the last year building. It is a monstrosity. It weighs 8 pounds. It runs on 16 nickel-cadmium batteries. It looks like something built from spare parts found in a garage, because quite frankly, that's exactly what it is. He enters the boardroom to meet his bosses, the executives of the world's most powerful photography company. He places the device on the mahogany table. He explains that the machine captures light, converts it into an electronic signal and stores it as numbers. No film, no chemicals, no paper. He calls this process filmless photography. He demonstrates it. It takes 23 seconds to record a single image onto a cassette tape. He then puts the tape into a player connected to a television set. A blurry black and white image of a lab assistant appears on the screen. It is ugly. The resolution is low, but it is a miracle. The executives stare at the screen. Then they look at Sasson. The room is quiet. Finally, one of the senior executives leans forward. He doesn't applaud. He doesn't request a patent strategy. He simply says, "That's cute, kid, but don't tell anyone about it." Those words, "Don't tell anyone," were more than just a rejection. It was a suicide note. What you are about to hear is not just a business case study. It is a tragedy. It is the story of a company that had the power to see the future, built the machine that would define the 21st century, and then driven by fear and greed locked that machine away and threw away the key. This is the story of how Kodak, the company that owned our memories, decided to kill its own creation, only to be consumed by its legacy. To grasp the scale of this mistake, we must first understand the magnitude of the Kodak empire. For those of you who are too young to remember the pre-digital world, it is difficult to convey just how dominant the yellow giant was. Imagine Google, Apple, and Instagram combined into a single corporate entity. That was Kodak in the 20th century. They didn't just sell cameras. They owned the concept of nostalgia itself. The phrase Kodak moment wasn't just a marketing slogan. It entered the English language as a term for a memory worth preserving. By 1976, Kodak accounted for 90% of film sales and 85% of camera sales in the United States. This wasn't just a monopoly, it was an empire. Like all kingdoms, however, it was built on a very specific source of wealth. This is the most critical part of the story, so bear with me. Kodak was not a camera company. It was a chemical company. They employed the classic razor and blades business model, but perfected it to an art form. They would sell you a camera cheaply, sometimes even at a loss. That was the razor. But to use it, you had to buy film, chemicals to develop it, and paper to print it. Those were the blades. The profit margins on these blades were enormous. We're talking about 70 or 80% profit on every roll of film. It was like printing money. Every time someone on Earth pressed the shutter button, a coin dropped into Kodak's pocket in Rochester. So when Steve Sasson walked into that room in 1975 with his digital camera, he wasn't just showing them a new gadget. He was showing them a device that didn't require film, it didn't need chemicals, it didn't need paper. To the executives, whose bonuses and careers had been built on the chemistry industry, this wasn't innovation. It was a virus. They asked Sasson a revealing question that day. Why would anyone want to look at their photos on a television screen? They asked. They couldn't conceive of a photograph that couldn't be held in the hand. They said, prints are cheap. Why would anyone want to look at an electronic picture? Sasson tried to explain. He invoked Moore's law. The idea that computer processing power doubles every 2 years. Using this, he calculated that it would take about 15 to 20 years for his digital camera to match the quality of consumer film. He told the executives, "You have about 2 decades to prepare." The executives heard 2 decades and relaxed. In the corporate world, 20 years is an eternity. They thought, great, we don't have to worry about this until the 1990s. However, instead of using those 20 years to make the transition, they dug their heels in deeper. They became victims of their own success. There is a common misconception about Kodak that we need to address. People often say Kodak failed because they didn't see digital coming, or Kodak failed because they didn't invest in technology. Both of these statements are completely false. In fact, it's the opposite. Throughout the 1980s and 90s, Kodak spent billions, literally billions, of dollars on digital research. They held almost every major patent for digital sensors. Even if you bought a high-end digital camera in the late 90s that said Nikon or Canon on the outside, the sensor inside was likely made by Kodak. They knew digital was on the horizon. They were the ones building it. So why did they fail? Because of a psychological phenomenon known as cannibalization. Imagine you have a golden goose that lays golden eggs every morning. The eggs represent film rolls. Now someone invents a robotic goose. It's great, it's the future. But it only lays ordinary eggs. In order to feed the robotic goose, you have to starve the golden goose. What would you do? Kodak's management was paralyzed by this dilemma. Whenever the digital division came up with a great product, the marketing and sales departments, the people selling the film, would crush it. They would say, "We can't launch this digital camera. If people buy this, they won't buy film. We'll be eating our own lunch." Instead of leading the revolution, they tried to compromise. In the world of technology, however, compromise is tantamount to death. They released strange hybrid products. Do you remember the photo CD? It was launched in the early 90s. The idea was that you could shoot on film and still make money for Kodak, and then take it to a store where it would be scanned onto a CD, giving you a digital copy. It was a transitional technology, but nobody wanted a bridge. They wanted to cross the river. There is a famous story from inside Kodak from this era. In 1993, a new CEO named George Fisher came in from Motorola to try and save the company. He believed in digital technology. However, he was fighting a war against the company's own culture. The chemical guys were the company's royalty. They looked down on the digital guys. During meetings about digital projects, the executives would literally roll their eyes. They called the digital division a money pit. They failed to understand that you have to invest in the future to survive in the present. But the greatest tragedy, the moment that truly makes you want to scream, happened in 2001. This is the story of the missed opportunity that could have made Kodak bigger than Facebook. In 2001, Kodak bought a website called Ophoto. Ophoto was an online photo sharing platform. Before Instagram, Flickr, or Facebook albums, there was Ophoto. Kodak suddenly had millions of users uploading their digital photos to the cloud. Just think about the data they had. They had the social network of the future right there. They could have transformed Ophoto into Instagram. They could have enabled people to like, comment on, and share memories globally. But remember that Kodak had a chemical mindset. They didn't view Ophoto as a social network. They saw it as a way to sell more printing paper. Their strategy for Ophoto was, get people to upload photos so we can ask them if they want to print those photos on calendars, mugs, and greeting cards. They treated the internet as just another means of getting a physical print into your hands. They were obsessed with the end product, not the interaction. In 2012, as part of their bankruptcy liquidation, Kodak sold Ophoto for a pittance. Less than 3 months later, Facebook bought Instagram for $1 billion. The irony is suffocating. Kodak had the platform, the brand name, and the users. But they lacked the vision to see that the value of a photo had shifted. It was no longer about preservation. It was about communication. The final nail in the coffin didn't come from Nikon or Canon. It came from Cupertino. When Steve Jobs took to the stage in 2007 to introduce the iPhone, he wasn't just unveiling a phone. He put a networked camera in everyone's pocket. Suddenly, image quality didn't matter as much as image connectivity. Kodak was still arguing that film offered superior resolution, dynamic range, and color depth. And they were right. Technologically, film was superior for a long time, but the market didn't care about superiority. It cared about good enough and instant. Kodak's entire business model evaporated. Why print a photo when you can just text it? Why buy an album when you can display photos on your Facebook wall? By the time Kodak finally realized they had lost the war, they had burned through their cash reserves. They tried to pivot to printers, pharmaceuticals, and anything else they could think of, but it was too late. The giant was bleeding out. The unthinkable happened in January 2012. The Eastman Kodak Company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The company, which had once employed over 145,000 people, and whose stock was once considered the safest investment in America, had gone bankrupt. But there's a twist that makes the story even more painful. Kodak wasn't the only film giant. There was another one, Fujifilm. Fujifilm, the Japanese competitor, faced the same crisis. Its business was also based on film sales. The digital wave hit them just as hard. But Fujifilm didn't die. In fact, they are now a thriving multi-billion-dollar conglomerate. Why? While Kodak was in denial, Fujifilm examined its assets with brutal honesty. They examined film and asked themselves, what is film really? They realized that film is made of collagen, and that the technology used to prevent film from fading is antioxidant technology. Fujifilm then used this knowledge to pivot into cosmetics. Astalift, a high-end skincare brand, was created by a film company. They realized that their expertise in layering chemicals on a thin surface could be applied to LCD screens, and so they became a major supplier to screen manufacturers. They diversified aggressively. They acknowledged that their core business was dying, so they cut it off to save the rest of the company. Meanwhile, Kodak clung to their dying business until it killed the whole company. They were in love with what they made, not what they knew. Kodak still exists today, but it is a shadow of its former self. They do some commercial printing and chemicals, but the empire is gone. The buildings in Rochester have been demolished. The patents were sold off to pay off debts. Ironically, many of them were sold to Apple and Google. So what can we learn from this 30-minute exploration of the downfall of a titan? The Kodak story is not about technology. It's about fear. It's about the difficulty of letting go of who you are today in order to become who you need to be tomorrow. It is the innovator's dilemma. When you're at the top, the only way forward seems to be downhill. Human beings, especially successful ones, hate stepping down. Steve Sasson, the man who invented the digital camera, is still alive today. In 2009, he was awarded the National Medal of Technology and Innovation by President Obama. In interviews, he doesn't seem angry. He seems wistful. He handed his company the keys to the future, but they were too afraid to turn the ignition. So as you go about your day and pull out your smartphone to take a photo of your lunch, your dog, or a sunset, take a moment to remember that yellow box. Remember that the technology enabling you to instantly share that moment with the whole world was developed in a snowy laboratory in 1975 by a company that chose to die rather than change. Ultimately, Kodak was right about one thing. They kept the memories, but they lost the future.